Hey everybody, welcome to Wednesday. Yes, I'm wearing the same Ed the Sock sweatshirt. It's just sweatshirt weather. It's not quite cold enough for a sweater. It's not quite warm enough for a t-shirt. It doesn't look great, I know, and it's the second day in a row because I'm pre-recording this, but it is what it is. You guys don't care, right? If you like this sort of video that I'm going to do today, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Okay, this is going to be a primer because people have been asking. People are rightly terrified to ask about things like gender performance, gender identity, and gender expression because they get screamed at by people on the internet. This will not prevent you from getting screamed at by those people on the internet because they like to create fluid definitions for terms that they can change at a moment's notice. I'm making this video for your understanding, so you have a better idea when somebody starts coming at you with something, whether there's somebody you should listen to or whether there's these people that just like to scream at people, and so they create these very rigid, ever-changing definitions of things that don't connect to any human rights code or law or anything like that anywhere. So this is just for information purposes. I'm sure some people will go, no, you're wrong, because they've heard a more rigid, or in some cases they've heard the terms used interchangeably. This is a really big problem in LGBTQ plus circles, is that some people have more dated terms for things. The reason the terms changed is either they changed to become more inaccurate. In the case of transgender versus transsexual, it changed because transsexual suggests that you're actually having gender affirmation surgery. Now, some people do, but not everybody does. And because that's serious surgery, they didn't want language that suggested unless you go through this really serious surgery, you're not considered, a valid trans person. That's why the term was changed from sex to gender. Now, of course, then people went along and started saying sex was a social construct too. We're not going to get into that today. That's not as important as the concepts behind the words. When Canada's Human Rights Code was amended, it was amended to include gender identity and gender expression, both categories, because they're different things. Gender identity is a person's innate, deeply held sense of identity. How you feel when you look at a person or a character. Do you see them as like you or not like you based on gender? How you feel about yourself inside. When you think about yourself, how do you feel about it? Do you feel male? Do you feel female? Do you feel kind of neither? Do you feel not very attached to it? When I was a kid, as an example, I didn't have very many female characters I connected with. It was characters like Lion-O from Thundercats. Oh man, that was, Beast from X-Men. Everybody's going, oh, she was a little furry. Okay. It was, I don't know. I know Lion-O was a hair color, but it was something about the way the characters talked. It was the way the characters related to their world. Both of them were sort of, their insides didn't match their outsides, because Beast was a super refined dude and he was blue fuzzy with big feet. Lion-O was significantly older on the outside than he was on the inside, because his stasis pod malfunctioned. So, there was some of that, but I didn't connect with female characters the same way, except for some of the characters on Gem and the Holograms. And I think that might have been that those women actually had jobs. They were one of the few female characters who weren't princess something something. They were musicians, so they had discernible jobs. Like, okay, they're performers. I can relate to that. But I wasn't into like Jem. I liked Aja, and I kind of like Kimber. I freaking loved Jazz from the Misfits. That character they added a few, like season 3, who played the saxophone and had like black hair with like the silver streaks in it. Oh man, she was the best. And I like the drummer lady they added a few seasons in too. But it's not the main characters, right? It wasn't the conventional this was, the chick that was like pining after the guy and the will they or won't. I didn't identify to any of that. I like the action stories. I like characters who were very dynamic. That's different. And you cannot train a kid to identify with, my sister. It was always, me and my friend Vera would be, I'm going to be Lion-O and I'm going to be Mumra. And my sister would always go, I want to be the princess. And we're like, there are no princesses in Thundercats. There's Chitara or Palmyra. Pick one. I want to be the princess. And then my mother would make us make up a princess character so my sister could play the princess. She came by that honestly too. Like, there are some girls who are just girly girls. They identify very strongly with all things girl because that indicates for them. There are some things that, we know that kids start recognizing these gendered expressions between the ages of 2 and 6. But kids seek out things that match their innate gender identity. Not every girl is going to like pink just because it's a girl color. I was like, get that shit away from me. I still have a bit of a get that shit away from me. Yeah, somebody tries to hand me a pink controller at a game, a game demo or something. Remember the Wii came out with the pink controllers? Girl, and I'm like, you hand me that, I will rip your hand off. And I couldn't say that today, right? Back then, that was kind of considered funny. Can't do that now. But I remember when it was a pink Wii and like a pink controller. I'm like, do not give me that pink controller. Do not. On principle. Other women, I like the pink one. They make these things in pink because there's a lot of women who like pink. There's a lot of guys who like pink. But those are expressions, right? Not identities. And all expressions and all identities must be valid. These people have the right to identify with the gender that feels right for them. And they have the right to express that gender in the way that feels right for them. That was a bigger issue. I remember when I was in school, there were a couple of Catholic schools in the neighborhood. And while I was in school, they actually changed the rules so that girls could wear pants instead of the skirts and be considered to still be in uniform. Now, somebody may ask, does that mean a guy can wear a skirt? Well, the particular reasons for a lot of it was it's Canada and pants are warmer in the winter. So there were no guys, wanting to wear skirts in February in Canada. But a lot of girls, once the rules were changed, continued to wear the pants even in the summer because they were more comfortable that way. They didn't like the skirts. I assume that, I shouldn't assume because they're Catholic schools, but by rights, you should also allow the boys to wear the tartan skirts. I don't know why that's not just a kilt when it's a guy, but I think there should be kilts for everybody. Just neutralize that. But yeah, I think it should go both ways. But that's an example of expression, right? It's not fair to force a portion of the population into impractical clothing because of their gender, right? Even if it's just, I don't feel comfortable in this. They shouldn't be forced into it because of their gender. If there are uniform options, if there's skirt, pants, button shirt, blouse, any combination of these is considered uniform, that's equal gender expression, right? Just because a woman wants to wear pants does not mean she does not identify as a woman. That's why they're separate categories. Now, there's a third category of gender performance that is a much more fluid category than gender expression. Gender performance is not protected, meaning, before COVID, I'd go to these drag brunches. And of course, the performers would be wearing, in some cases, almost nothing, a G-string and pasties. Other times they were wearing, the really platform stiletto shoes and the fishnets and like a pink mini skirt and like really, 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 really hyper feminized gender performance. An employer can say, no, you're not allowed to wear fishnet stockings, a pink mini skirt, and platform stilettos to work. That's not protected. Like, there's an example, right? Like, the Bermuda shorts, no shirt, the guys wear on vacation, no, you can't wear that to the office, right? Like, that's the difference. There is a greater spectrum of gender performance. It is more fluid. You can perform gender differently from day to day. Gender expression tends not to be quite that fluid, though it does change. I mean, I wore ties to school in high school, and that wasn't a performative act. That was, I am comfortable dressing this way right now, I went through times where I wore skirts to school. That didn't last as long. But it was me expressing how I felt about myself at the time. It was not putting on another persona the way I do with Princess Sparkle Muffin, which is, a hyper feminine gender performance, or Social Justice Warrior, who is a male performing character. That's the difference between expression and performance. One is sort of an expression of self. Another is a persona you step into. So that's the difference between the three things. Now, why does this matter? There's this nasty habit of telling people that they're not really the gender identity they declare because of the gender expression that a third party determines to be insufficiently normative. And that's the problem, right? I know one person who uses she, they primarily, doesn't get upset when someone says he, prefers they. So they prefer the they pronoun. It's a form of expression, pronouns. They feel female as their gender identity, but they have a beard. That gets people saying, well, you can't really be trans, you have a beard. We can't really be a trans woman. Well, yes, they can. That's different than a drag performer I know, great performer named Bearda. She's a drag performer. She's not a trans woman. She has a beard in her drag performance. And she somehow manages to make it the different colors of her wigs. Like, she changes the color of her beard. She told me how she did it. I still don't get it. It's amazing. But that's a performance, right? That performer is male at his day job. But he's Bearda, she. Not the same. One has a male gender identity. One has a female gender identity. That should be respected. You don't have the right to tell someone that their gender identity is not real because they don't express that gender identity in a way that is normative. And that's really important. We're more familiar with this phenomenon of gender identity and gender expression without lesbians in public. Somebody like an Ellen DeGeneres or a Rachel Maddow, who, I think Rachel Maddow, the minute she doesn't have to wear makeup, she's like, out, damn spot. Get this off my face. When they put false eyelashes on her for TV, she's like blinking like crazy. She always wears like no makeup and her glasses in any of the like, pre-production videos she does. They force that makeup on her for TV, Ellen always wears like the running shoes and the jackets and like the khakis and everything like that. We're more comfortable with that. We're more used to that gender expression versus gender identity. But I mean, I remember in the 90s, there were a lot of jokes about women who did that, right? Less so now. Now it's more accepted. Similarly, we kind of get the idea of drag. I mean, the fact that Tom Holland can like dress in drag to do a Rihanna dance number for Lip Sync Battle, or The Rock can do like a Taylor Swift impression. There's an example of gender expression being a lot more open than it once was. Nobody questions The Rock's masculinity when he does that. Now, in some ways, that is The Rock flaunting his masculinity, because he can be shake it off, and nobody goes, oh, you know what, it was or something. He's still tough, right? Like that's we're loosening up in that regard. We are still nuts about gender identity. People, for some odd reason, just can't grok that idea. And I guess it's hard. I guess it's harder for people who haven't felt, what I felt of, hey, when I'm a kid, Lionel's like me. What do you mean he's not because he's a boy? What are you talking about? No, I see myself in Lionel. If you haven't had that experience, right, it's harder to understand. Now, the Jungians go, no, that's just the animus and the anima, and we all have that. No, we don't. There are some people, it's just like some people are totally gay. Some people are bisexual. Some people are totally straight. No, not every person has, an opposite equivalent inside them. A lot of people do, because I think most people, just like sexuality, aren't totally one thing or the other, but some people are. There are people that are like straight up straight. There are some people who are straight up gay. They are. No middle ground. Same thing. Some people are straight up, just born in the wrong body. Some people like me are less like me. I mean, just look at my background. Okay, she's got the cute little stuffed toys, but then she's got Plastic Man being homies with the Spectre, right? And it's just kind of like, what are you? Like, this is my expression, right? Like, this is me. I am all these things. I like all these things. Don't make me choose, right? Whereas other people wouldn't want anything pink. I had to come to terms with pink, right? I don't know why the Barba Papa being pink never bothered me. That's the one pink thing I liked as a kid. Maybe just because it was so weird, I don't know. It's weird. But I guess if pink is like creepy, I'm good with it. But when pink is super girly, it's like, ew. But this is why I want to talk about this stuff, because I know there are some well-meaning people who are just like, I don't get it. And then you get, which is okay. You don't have to get it. Do you get, quantum physics? Do you deny the existence of quantum physics because you don't get it? You don't get how it works? You can't do like quantum calculations? No, of course not. You accept that, okay, this is something that exists. I don't get it, but it exists. But then you get into the thing of, well, if gender identity doesn't match the body, then why can't someone's racial identity match their body? And that's when people get very strong reactions, rightly, that they don't understand. And the big difference between gender identity and race is that unlike sex, which I know there are some people that try to claim that gender is a social construct. And, you know, the problem is that implies if it's a social construct, it's not innate, it's external, it's categories we just created. And the problem with that is that actually fuels the argument of, well, if it's a social construct, then people can adapt to a social construct, right? You don't have to change your body if it's just a construct. When no, dysphoria is not rejecting a social construct. It's real and it's rotten. I'm pretty sure we're eventually going to realize that there's a biochemical or a physiological underpinning to gender identity. And yeah, that is different than racial categorizations, which actually are social constructs. There aren't the same differences in the brains of, at one time they tried to claim that, there were inherent intellectual differences between different races. That wasn't so. We do know that things like testosterone and things like estrogen do impact things like aggression and other elements, fight or flight responses, reaction. We can measure that in a way that, you can't with race. The reason you can't pick your race the way you can pick your gender is that the people who are assigned the races with more prejudice against them don't get to opt out. They are being falsely demeaned and falsely discriminated against. They are being treated as inherently different. It is something that is forced upon them. You don't get to just pick all the good things about a racial identity and avoid all the bad. When somebody affirms, when a trans woman affirms their gender by transitioning to female, they have to deal with all the misogyny that comes with it. They can't opt out. People don't just look at them and go, oh no, you're still a guy in a lot of ways, so we're going to treat you. No, they get all the misogyny. That's not the same as a white person going, I'm one day going, well, I my identity is black. Bull. Right? Not the same thing. We don't have, the whole Rachel Dolezal started the idea of transracial identities for a hot minute, but that went away for understandable reasons. Because that's an example of something actually, and that's, I say, that's not saying that different skin colors aren't real. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that a difference in pigmentation doesn't change how a person thinks or a person's aptitudes or anything like that, right? Unlike, what the big fight in sport about whether trans women should be allowed to compete in women's sports and whether they have a bone density, muscle advantage, everything like that. More and more, they're actually finding out they don't. So that's very interesting. That'll take time to convince people that they don't. It'll probably involve letting trans athletes compete at a level below the Olympics and show that, no, a lot of them will probably come in middle of the pack. To let them sort of go, a tall woman is a tall woman. It has nothing to do, a woman who is 5'11" or 6 feet tall for any reason is going to have an advantage in certain sports based on height. It's got nothing to do with gender in that regard. And nobody transitions, nobody goes through all of that just to go to the Olympics. They don't. So that's why you can't do it. That's why it's different. again, that's not to say that racialized experiences are not meaningful, right? Because of that expressiveness element. It means that there is nothing innately insert race here. What we see as racial are actually cultural. The difference between race and culture is every culture has gender roles. Some cultures have more than two. Some cultures have only two. But every culture has gender roles. That is something that is universal. So don't pull that stuff. Don't compare race to gender. Don't. They're not the same thing. They function totally differently. The underpinnings are totally different. There used to only be 3 races: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and that's even an offensive term now, and a word I can't say anymore because it's too much like a very bad word. That was it. The idea of brown people, did you notice there's no Hispanic in there. There's no South Asian in there. 3 races. And of course it was all just based on where you sat in the colonial pecking order, right? It had, they made no distinction between a Japanese person, a Korean person, a Chinese person, an Indian person. I don't think Pakistan even existed back then. A Sri Lankan person, I think it was Ceylon back then, but they made no distinction. And to us, like, that's absurd. Like, a Chinese person doesn't look anything like an Indian person, but they were all in that middle ground, right? Between white people and the offensive term for black people. Race spun out from that, but, well, we're adding genders too. We're really not. We're creating names for states of being that right now don't have names. A trans experience is different from a cisgendered experience, right? It's not the same. They're not equivalent. A trans woman has a very different set of challenges than a cisgender woman does. Same as a trans man versus a cisgender man. They are different experiences that deserve equal status and deserve to be treated as equally valid. You can't invalidate it just based on, oh, well, one's a much smaller minority than the other, therefore it's just an anomaly. You can't do that. You can't. There is a big difference between asking questions and saying something that is dismissive. And when you start playing the numbers game like that, when you start referring to something that a person's perfectly healthy, they're just not simple. When you start referring to that as an aberration, that's not right. Because something that needs fixing is something that is causing someone pain or is causing them to, not be able to function at peak. Well, once somebody gets to, adopt the gender identity that they feel comfortable with, they thrive, right? They thrive. Problem solved. That's how we know we're actually addressing the problem, right? When you feed a delusion, as some people claim it is, people get worse. They don't get better. So there you go. Right there. Explanation. I'm sure some people are like, no. Please just listen. Because I saw this with gay and lesbian and bisexual stuff in the 90s. People kept insisting that we were coddling people. It was a phase. If we didn't encourage them, basically people would stop being gay. Of course, we think that's horrible now. But that was what a lot of people thought was best. They thought being gay was just aberrant behavior. And the kindest thing they could do for somebody is to train them out of that. Of course, we think totally different now. Opinions of trans people and non-binary people are going to go that way. So learn from history. This isn't saying shut up. This isn't saying just conform. This is saying look at the examples of history. Every single one of these things has gone the same way. It's easier and less painful, and more people will continue to like you if you come at it from an informed perspective with proper historical context than if you continue to fight it because you personally can't relate to the experience. Okay? Okay, hope that made sense. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LanaK. Thanks for watching.